By 1900, the last decade, and the last years of the last decade, Europe will be flooded with books about a coming doom around the corner. Nobody knew what it was, and in most cases, they could hardly even explain exactly the data that was causing them to think this way. But all of Europe suddenly saw this, so that somewhere between 1850 and 1900, all of Western civilization, living in the most advanced cities and the most cultures on the planet, went from the highest and most optimistic interpretation of life to a sense of doom. And that's the world he's going to live in. That's the 50 years from 1850 to 1900 where this German boy from the north is going to live. That's the world he will live in. And that's the experience he has to interpret. It is to go from that extraordinarily optimistic moment, 1850. And Germany was every bit as optimistic as England or France. They were very, very advanced in terms of education, in terms of technology. In fact, they were more advanced than England was. So he was seeing around him in northern Germany every bit as advanced a technological and scientific atmosphere as anybody in London was seeing. And the same change will be visible in Germany in 1899 when he is at the end of his life. That's the world that this little boy born in northern Germany is going to live in and try to interpret, try to write some philosophical statements to explain what he has just seen. Coming from a small town in northern Germany, in Prussia. Prussia was the most advanced. It was the home of the King of Prussia. The King of Prussia is going to lead the unification of Germany very soon during his lifetime. And so all of Germany will be eventually unified under the leadership of Prussia. That means Berlin. His town is just south of Berlin, so near Leipzig. He will go to the University of Leipzig later in his life. And so he's living in the very heart of Prussia, and that's the world in which he will be born and grow up. Here is his father and mother, Karl Ludwig Nietzsche and Franziska. They were both from Lutheran religious families. So we're starting out with this little boy born in 1844 into a family where both sides of his family have been part of the Lutheran Church. His father and his grandfather were very significant leaders. His father is a devout Lutheran minister. In Frederick's youthful memoirs, he writes when he was 14 that his father was a cheerful and well-loved man, the very picture of a country parson. Father was a good, kind, and generous Christian minister. So when his son turns against the Christian faith of his father, he's consciously, knowingly turning against a perfectly admirable example of a Christian leader. And his mother was from the same origin. Her father was also a Lutheran minister. So both sides of the family were Lutherans, and northern Germany was and still is the home of Luther. My blue mark on the map shows you that Luther's territory is exactly the Nietzsche's territory. It's Leipzig, whether it's north or south. Here's a good map showing you some of the locations of Luther's life. So the University of Wittenberg, where he pounded the 95 Theses on the door, that's Wittenberg right there. You can see just miles away from Leipzig. Luther went to the University of Magdeburg. You can see that's just a little north of Leipzig, and Leipzig is where Nietzsche will go to the university. Here he is, the son of a Lutheran minister in the heart of Lutheran territory. Now, does a Lutheran origin tell us anything? Yes, definitely. Because remember, in the 1517 moment when you have an act by a local professor in Wittenberg, at the University of Wittenberg, to pound the 95 Theses on the door. That's the origin of the Reformation. In other words, little Friedrich Nietzsche is growing right up in the heart of the origin of the Reformation. The Reformation is the moment when this leader separates off, in the beginning, northern Germany, from the international Roman Catholic Church. And therefore, this rebel will come out of that world. Is not surprising at all, because this world was a world of rebels. This went right back to Luther himself. If we change and look at Italy or Spain, we see in both cases a very rigid and a very, very successful, uniform, national Roman Catholic structure. And in neither case did either one of those countries produce a Luther. The Luther came from northern Germany and from exactly this intellectual milieu and this world in which this particular professor can throw up a challenge to Rome far enough away so it can't get their hands on him. Yeah, they'll try, but they're not going to be able to. And of course, that's the essence of his success. Remember, if they could have gone down the road to Florence and arrested him, they would have done that and they would have executed him. But they couldn't do that in northern Germany. Part of it was because of the nature of Germany, because of the independence of the local princes. Germany was made up of a dozen or so local princes, and so the Duke of Saxony protected his local professor. He wasn't going to turn the professor over to the authorities, and he didn't. So you see right there is a reason that this particular 19th century Lutheran milieu out of which he comes would also be the very same one that would produce the rebel, as it had already done in 1517 with Luther. So he's coming from the Lutheran world. And here is his father. There's little Nietzsche, and I love that the locals called him the little pastor. Isn't that sweet? Here's what his father said. His father says, little brother Fritz. So brother Fritz is a wild boy who can sometimes be controlled only by his papa, inasmuch as the rod is never far from him. Yeah, you can imagine he probably didn't use the rod very much. Now someone else helps more powerfully, and that is the dear Holy Christ, who has already taken hold of even little Fritz by head and heart, so that he wants to hear and speak of nothing but the Holy Ghost. He's brilliant, he's precocious, he's poetic, and he is musical. So he's already playing the piano. He was a brilliant pianist. And just a gifted child. His mother was also from a Lutheran family, from a neighboring town, and his father is given his position. It's a good position, and so he knows that he should be married to be a pastor. He needs a wife, and so through friends he's introduced to this family and meets Francisca and falls in love with her, and they get married. He's older by 13 years, has a job, is settled down. They have a child right away. So there are 3 children born. One of the 3 dies. Little Ludwig Joseph, born in 1848, died. So it'll be just two kids, 2 parents. Now, for Nietzsche, the disaster in his life and for his mother was the early death of his father in 1848. We don't know exactly what kind of a brain disease he had. It could have been a tumor, that's for sure, the way it was described. It was a long, terrible, agonizing illness, and then, of course, he was dying very young. And so that meant that now they would all pick up and move to Naumburg, where their grandparents had a house and where they could move in. Now, this also changed their finances because, of course, their father had been well paid, and now suddenly she's a widow with 2 children, and she's going to be pretty dependent on her parents and whatever money they can put together. But the biggest difference for Frederick is that he's now going to be the only boy in this family with a mother and a sister and a grandmother and 2 aunts. So all these women, and he's the only boy. And so all these women now can devote themselves to Frederick. Constantly, 24 hours a day, they can figure out what he needs and what he should do and how he could be better than what he was already being. So his life changes rather dramatically. Whatever influence his father might have had on him, all the different things that you learned growing up with your father there, that's all over. He's going to be the special, precious boy of all these women. Here's the house. It's still there, and in 1994 it was turned into a museum, so you can visit this in his town, in Naumburg, close to his original birth town, so all close. So a very new world, a very different kind of a life, and I think that we can evaluate his later personality and trace a lot of it to this kind of life that he's going to have for the next 5 or 6 years before he goes away to university, of being very, very favored by all of these women in the household. And most important of all was his sister. So he has a sister who's 2 years younger, and they will be completely and totally devoted to each other. No other siblings, and so they turned into each other up until she marries. So up until she married, this is his very best friend. And this is the most important woman in his life. He never marries, and he never is able to successfully turn all of his attentions to some other woman. And so Elizabeth remains the most important woman in his life from beginning to end. And, of course, in the last years, when he needs constant care, once again, he goes home to her and is in her care. And then not only will he be in her care, but also all his papers and all his publications and all his books and all his notes will also be in her care. So in a way, Elizabeth dominates his life all the way through to the very end. Did she inhibit his ability to fall in love with somebody else and get married and start a life? Maybe. She certainly interfered with one of them. I'll tell you about it in a minute. She certainly did interfere, but it probably wasn't her fault that it didn't work out. But still, the devotion between the two of them certainly got in the way of other people getting into their life. They trusted each other with every single one of their secrets, every single one of their thoughts. And so it was pretty hard for a guy to get into her life or the other way around. So certainly during those years when you're a teenager, when he might have met somebody, he certainly didn't. Elizabeth was everything. And so they stay devoted to each other until she marries in 1885. And he most definitely did not approve of the man. And so it meant a complete break between the two of them. When she got married, he did not go to the wedding, and that certainly would tell you everything right there. Family wedding that the brother doesn't attend is a statement. So very, very close, terrible break over a husband and a marriage, and then when the husband dies, she returns to Germany and just in time, really, to help him. And so that's their story.